Adamski held the UFO spotlight for some time. The Venusians paid him another visit, this time at the restaurant, and he photographed their ship. This, whether by Venusian fate or design, increased the flow of traffic to the restaurant at the base of Mount Palomar. It also had its side effects. An astronomer from the observatory that houses the world-famous 200-inch telescope on top of Mount Palomar told me, "I hate to admit it, but the number of weekend visitors has picked up here. People drive down to hear George and decide that since they're down here, they might as well come up and see our establishment." But George Adamski didn't hold the front center of the stage for long. In rapid succession, others stepped forward and hesitantly admitted that they too had been contacted. Truman Bethurum, a journeyman mechanic of Redondo Beach, California, was next up. Actually, he admitted, he had been the first Earthman to talk to a person from another world. Back on the night of July 26, 1952, 4 months before Adamski, a group of 8 or 10 short, olive-skinned men with black wavy hair had awakened him while he was asleep in a truck in the desert near Mormon Flats, Nevada. These little men, unlike Adamski's, spoke any language. "You name it," they'd quipped to Bethurum, "we speak it." In a newspaper article that was voted Best Read of 1953, Bethurum told how the little man he met had been more cooperative and had actually taken him into their saucer, a huge job, 300 feet in diameter and 16 feet high. Once inside, Bethurum had met the captain of the scow, a true leader of men. Aura Raines was her name, and she was a Venus de Milo with arms and warm blood. When she spoke, her words rhymed. They chatted, and Bethurum learned that he was on the Admiral's scow, the command ship of Clarion's fleet of saucers. All in all, Bethurum made 11 visits to Aura's scow. Each time, they'd sit and talk. Bethurum told her about the Earth, and she told of the idyllic Shangri-La type planet of Clarion, a yet undiscovered planet which is always opposite the moon. But before too long, both Truman Bethurum and George Adamski had to move over. Daniel Fry, an engineer, stepped in. At a press conference to kick off the International Saucer Convention in Los Angeles, Fry told how he had not only contacted the spacemen 2 years before Adamski and Bethurum, he had actually ridden in a flying saucer. It had all started on the night of July 4th, 1950, when engineer Fry was temporarily employed at White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. It was a hot night, and with nothing else to do, Fry decided to take a walk across the desert. He hadn't traveled far when he saw a bluish light hovering over the mountains, which rimmed this famous proving ground. He paid no attention. He'd heard flying saucer stories before, and just plain didn't believe them. But as he watched, the light came closer and closer and closer, until a weird craft came silently to rest on the desert floor, not 70 feet away. For seconds, Fry, who had seen missile-age developments at White Sands that would have dumbfounded most laymen, merely stood and stared. The object, Fry told newsmen, was an ovoid spheroid about 30 feet at the equator. Fry has a habit of drifting off into the technical. Its outside surface was a highly polished silver with a slight violet iridescent glow. At first, Fry wanted to run, but his rigid technical training overrode his common natural urges. He decided to go over to the object and see what made it tick. He circled it several times, and nothing broke the desert silence. Then he touched it. "Better not touch that," a voice in a Hollywoodian tone. Fry recoiled. The voice softened and added, "Take it easy, pal. You're among friends." After politely reading off the spaceman, or whoever he was, for scaring him, Pal Fry and the voice settled down for a friendly moonlight chat. Fry learned that the voice was indeed that of a spaceman, and they were down to pick up a new supply of air. After about 4 years of Earth air transfusions, according to the spaceman, they would become adapted to our atmosphere and our gravity and become immunized to your biotics. The craft, Fry was told, was a cargo carrier, unmanned and built to zoom down and scoop up Earth air. The conversation went on, waxing technical at times, and ended with an invitation to look into the ship. Then the spaceman, possibly carried away by all the interest Fry was showing, offered a ride. Fry accepted, and they anti-demagnetized off for New York City. 30 minutes later, they were back at White Sands. Over New York City, they came down from 35 to 20 miles, and Fry could read the marquee of the Fulton Theater. The 7-Year Itch was playing. He hadn't told the Air Force about his ride before because he was afraid he'd lose his job. But at the press conference, he did plug his new book, The White Sands Incident. By this time, Adamski had already published his book, Flying Saucers Have Landed, and it looked as if Fry was going to cut him out. But Fry took a lie detector test on a widely viewed West Coast television show and flunked it flat. His stock dropped as fast as it had risen, but the decline was somewhat checked when a well-known Southern California medium wrote to her old friend, J. Edgar Hoover, about the situation. Hoover, the story goes, shot back an answer. Lie detectors are no good. But the damage had been done. The rigged lie detector test had unfortunately relegated Daniel Fry, engineer, missile expert, part owner of an engineering plant, and interplanetary hitchhiker to the Bush League. With Adamski and Bethurum on the stage and Fry peeking out of the wings, all hell broke loose. One could say that everyone tried to get into the act, but I'd rather think that each colony of space people tried to promote their own candidate. In England, one Cedric Allingham met a Martian on the moors. In France, Germany, the United States, Portugal, Brazil, Spain, everywhere, people too uneducated to pull a hoax met green men, dark men, white men, big men with little heads, little men with big heads, and men with pointed heads. They wore motorcycle belts, baggy pants, diver suits, and were naked. One lady proudly announced that a Venusian had tried to seduce her, and within days another snorted in disgust. A Martian had seduced her. Then Adamski took a hop through outer space and back. Saucers poured forth words of wisdom via radio, light beams, and mental telepathy. All of these messages were duly recorded on tape, and sales were hot at $4.50 per 10-minute tape. Not to be outdone by any other lousy planet, the Venusians picked up a young man from Los Angeles and actually took him to Venus. Not once, but 3 times. He packed in audiences by telling how he had been contacted one night and asked by a strange man if he would go on an important mission. Afraid, but not one to shirk his patriotic duties, he met the stranger at a prearranged spot and was whisked off to Venus. During a high-level conference up there, he was given the word, "Tell the Earthlings to lay off their atomic weapons, or else they're killing all our doves, and we make our flying saucers out of the feathers our live doves shed." The Venusians, this space traveler warned his audiences, were already infiltrating the Earth, and he intimated that they were ready to move in case we didn't cease atomic testing. His next 2 trips to Venus were purely social. The highlight of his lecture, when he awes his audience, is when he whips out his proof. 1. A blood smear on a slide, genuine Venusian blood. 2. An affidavit from his landlady stating he wasn't home on 3 occasions, and 3. A photo of a Venusian walking in Los Angeles' MacArthur Park. The mere fact that the Venusian looks like any Joe Dokes walking down the street is a picayunish point. Venusians look just like us. And it hasn't stopped. During the big UFO flap of 1957, a man stumbled into a landing saucer and chatted a while with its occupants. A few months later, soon after the atomic-powered USS Nautilus made its historic trip under the polar ice cap, this same man snorted in disgust. He packed his suitcase and started on a lecture tour. Months before, he'd been there in a flying saucer. Once again, people shelled out hard cash to hear his story. Wherever you are, Mr. P.T. Barnum, you are undoubtedly grinning from ear to ear. But there is a sober side. The common undertone to many of these stories, hot from the lips of a spaceman, is utopia. On these other worlds, there is no illness, and they've learned how to cure all diseases. There are no wars, they've learned how to live peaceably. There is no poverty, everyone has everything he wants. There is no old age, they've learned the secret of eternal life. Too many times this subtle pitch can be boiled down to, "Step right up, folks, and put a donation in the pot. I'm just on the verge of learning the spaceman's secrets, and with a little money to carry out my work, I'll give you the secret." I've seen a man, crippled by arthritis, hobbling out into the desert in hopes that his friend who talks to the Martians could get them to cure him on their next trip. I've seen pensioners who needed every buck they had shell out money to help buy radio equipment to contact some planet to find out how they'd solve their economic problems. I saw a little old lady in a many times mended dress put down a $10 bill to help promote a peace campaign backed by the Venusians. She'd lost 2 sons in the war, but had 4 grandsons she wanted to keep alive. A couple died and left $15,000 to a man to build a longevity machine so others could live. The Martians had given him the plans. A woman died of thirst and exposure in the Mojave Desert, trying to reach the spot where a man told her he was going to make a contact. Some of it isn't comical. Even though the field is becoming crowded, through thick and thin, Martian and Venusian, the old